Jose Cardenas is an associate at Visión Americas and one of the most knowledgeable analysts in Washington about inter-American affairs. Served in senior positions in the State Department, the National Security Council, AID, the OAS, and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Like our other panelists, he's appeared on CNN, Fox News, and National Public Radio. He received his master's degree from Georgetown University, and he, too, has been someone to whom we can turn to if we want to know what is really happening, not only in Cuba, but throughout Latin America. Jose?
Thank you, Lee. And I also want to lend my profound gratitude to Lee Edwards for his dedication and his commitment to keeping this project alive. I wanted to pick up on something Lee said at the top of his comments, where he referred to the shocking ignorance of so many Americans about the cost, the toll that communism has taken on populations around the world. And I want to take that comment a step further and add to it that, and I'm sure Lee would absolutely agree, that part of the problem is that our understanding of communism, our knowledge of communism, has been so corrupted by the efforts of so many to whitewash the historical record and to continue to this day, even as the younger generations coming through that did not grow up with the image of the wall, had no understanding, appreciation for what the wall meant, still today are being victimized by the efforts of so many to distort the historical record. And with that in mind, I just wanted to refer to a couple of recent incidents that I encountered, how it happens to this very day. And I want to, if you all would just indulge me for a second, I'm making the assumption that everybody in this room knows who Fidel Castro is. And if you don't, you may not be in the right room. But again, so I want to follow that up by asking if anybody knows who Efraín Ríos Montt is.
Yeah.
Okay. Guatemala. One person, okay. Now, that's telling in and of itself, because earlier this year, General Ríos Montt, who was a military general who ran Guatemala for 16 months in the early 80s, during that country's brutal civil war. He was brought up on trial in Guatemala on charges of genocide, right-wing military dictator. And so, in a blog that I write for foreignpolicy.com, I wrote, I didn't pass judgment on whether Ríos Montt was guilty or not guilty on charges of genocide, but I asked the question, how is it that right-wing military dictators in Latin America, whether it's Ríos Montt in Guatemala or Pinochet in Chile, how is it that they are hounded to their dying days by international activists, and no one makes a sound about the crimes of Fidel Castro against the Cuban people? No one is calling for his accountability, for his trial on charges. And that question generated an angry leftist to write in the comments section, how on earth can you compare the crime, I mean, whatever Fidel Castro did to the likes of a Ríos Montt and a General Pinochet? And I looked at that, and again, reaffirmed, of course, confirmed that we still have a problem. And Rios Montt, as I said, was on trial for the deaths of 1,700 indigenous Guatemalans in the highlands during that brutal civil war. He ruled for 16 months. Pinochet a little bit longer, about 15 years. Pinochet is usually attributed to about 3,000 deaths to his dictatorship in 15 years. Now, I understand it's never a good thing to get into a comparison about death and destruction, which is worse. But for goodness sake, ladies and gentlemen, Fidel Castro ran Cuba as the absolute dictator for 50 years, and is also attributed to about 100,000 Cuban deaths can be attributed to his. This is a country of what was about 6 million in 1959 to about 11 million today. Writes a biography of Che Guevara, and so he goes to Cuba to do his research, and he is subjected to the whole 9 yards, and comes back and includes a chapter. It's a big tome. There's a chapter in his biography about Che Guevara that talks about the Battle of Santa Clara. It's a city in Cuba. And of course, he got absolutely credulously goes down to Cuba and gets all of the information from Cuban commissars about the Battle of Santa Clara. That's his research. And so what he gets is a highly fictionalized account of the Battle of Santa Clara, where Che Guevara is presented as this heroic, absolutely militarily brilliant guerrilla general that vanquishes a massive Batista army because of his absolute guerrilla brilliance. Well, John Lee Anderson swallows it whole, includes it in his book on Che Guevara. But this is the problem. It doesn't stop there. An otherwise very respectable writer and opinion maker is Max Boot, who I believe is now affiliated with the Council on Foreign Relations. I read his writings, and very solid. He's right of center, and so he writes a book on guerrilla warfare. Huge book that's out now on the shelves, and he cites the Anderson book as his source to present a highly fictionalized account of Che Guevara's military prowess. So this was exposed by a Cuban-American author by the name of Humberto Fontova, who has written some brilliant books exposing all of these myths. And Humberto had gone and actually interviewed people who were there at Santa Clara the day of the battle. It turned out it was to be kind. It was referred to as a skirmish. It was in no way anything like any pitched battle. It was a cat and mouse little game that the guerrillas played with Batista's police forces and security forces. And the total casualties of that day, I think, were 6. But yet, here we have, otherwise, anybody in this room, I'm sure, would say, Max Boot, he's a reliable guy. I'll read his book on guerrilla warfare. But you're going to get an entirely fictionalized account of what happened that day. So anyway, that is, again, the challenge for all of us, everybody in this room, because you're here because you care about freedom, you care about the historical record, you care about the people who are coming after us. And you want them to get a clear, unfictionalized account of the historical record. So in order to prepare them for their lives, in order to prepare them to make decisions about how best to maximize prosperity, human happiness of them and their families, Latin America today, let me just go briefly, 21st century socialism as brought to us by the late Hugo Chavez. Obviously, old wine in a new bottle. What happened in Latin America and why we are still carrying this historical burden of these populists that pretend or want to convince everybody they're still animated by Marxist-Leninist thought. Today it's Venezuela, it's Ecuador, it's Bolivia, and depending on if he's taking his meds or not, Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, is that about 15 years ago, the radical left in Latin America got smart. And, you know, it happens. Even a blind squirrel will find an acorn once in a while. They figured out that shooting their way into power was not really working out too well. And so they began to understand that they could use the trappings of democracy, use the institutions of democracy, because as in Latin America, very nascent, very weak, very pliable, they could use the trappings, the mechanics of democracy to get into power. And as Ariel said, populism. They have exploited populism to get into the political game, to get into power by stoking resentments, stoking envy. And for example, well, and that's easy to understand if you know Latin America, because Latin America's biggest problem continues to be inequality. Inequality of opportunity, inequality of economic standing. So they ride waves of resentments and envy into power, and once they get there, then they begin to hollow out what's left of any other institutions. They begin to write new constitutions that invest more power in the executive. They undercut separation of powers. They use the legal system and the corruptibility of the courts to squeeze the media and to also squeeze the opposition. So that these countries now are, even though they ostensibly can say, well, we were elected, they use that as a pretense to then impose the types of characteristics and what we know to be the authoritarian model, the totalitarian model. They're not there, obviously, on the totalitarian model yet, but they certainly do have a neo-authoritarian bent whereby opposition is highly constrained. There is no outlet for opposition due to control of the media. Economies are centralized, more state ownership, driving out foreign investment, driving out U.S. companies, and again, refounding their countries on this nebulous model of 21st socialism. The good news is that we can be confident that the contradictions of such systems will inevitably catch up with them. But again, the United States policy should be obviously to make sure our friends succeed, and don't provide any succor to our enemies. Right now, after all of the insults, after blaming the United States for giving Chavez his cancer, for blaming U.S. officials with trying to assassinate him, Chavez's successor, Nicolás Maduro, the Obama administration is still bending over backwards to restore relations with Venezuela. And that is just sending a terrible signal throughout the hemisphere. With that, I'll stop, because I know we are running up on